2 cops arrested for manslaughter because they killed an unarmed individual in a parked car. They were arrested quickly, swiftly. Put up the picture of the 2 cops who got arrested. Kind of figured that, didn't you? Let me give you some background to this story. The unarmed man, his name was Daniel Valley, 34 years of age. He battled a drug addiction. According to the family, he often found himself on the wrong side of the law to feed his habit, but he was never violent and he was never a fighter. Put the deputies back up who were arrested and charged with manslaughter. Those 2 men you see are from the Jefferson Parish, Louisiana Sheriff's Office. They have been fired. They have been arrested for manslaughter after they fatally shot an unarmed man in a parked car, okay? The unarmed man, let's put his picture back up. Daniel leaves behind a 12-year-old daughter. His ex-wife said they were trying to reestablish a better relationship with her father if he had the chance to get back on track. In an interview with NOLA.com, his aunt, Tara Phillips, told the outlet, quote, "He's a struggling addict. That doesn't mean he should have been shot and killed in the manner that he was." All right, let's go to the sheriff of Jefferson Parish. His name is Joseph Lapinto III. We've covered this parish before. We've covered this sheriff. I'm going to get into that in a minute. As reported by the New York Times, the sheriff identified the fired officers as Isaac Hughes, 29 years of age, and Jonathan Lewis, 35. Mr. Hughes had been employed with the department since 2013 and Mr. Lewis since 2020. Each faces 1 count of manslaughter. The deputies and their lawyers could not be reached for comment on Tuesday. Okay, listen, good. You kill unarmed people, they pose no threat to you. You should be arrested for murder, manslaughter, criminal negligence, whatever it is, whatever fits, you should be arrested for it. The responsibility factor should be higher with law enforcement, not lower. Once again, the right thing happened here after an unarmed man was killed. Put up the mugshot of the deputies again. Yeah. I mean, they go around shooting people in cars and the person is unarmed. They go to jail. The criminal justice knows how to prosecute officers. Wow. Do you find it ironic that they are both black? Okay, it gets deeper. The sheriff said the officer's use of force was not justified. Remember, that's what the sheriff is saying. The use of force was not justified. I agree with the sheriff. These men should be in jail, arrested for manslaughter. After they shot this individual during a standoff with the police early Wednesday, just south of New Orleans. The shooting happened at 2 a.m. when the police, responding to a noise complaint in the area, found Mr. Valley inside of a vehicle parked in front of a known crack house. The sheriff said during a news conference Monday night, officers repeatedly ordered the young man to come out of the car to exit the vehicle, but he refused. The sheriff said during the standoff, which lasted about 12 minutes, Mr. Valley locked the doors and eventually started the engine, according to the sheriff. The sheriff said this escalated the situation. Deputies drew their weapons and they started firing because they expected the suspect to just start driving, okay? During the Louisiana encounter, Mr. Valley had raised his hands, but at one point dropped them, hitting the vehicle's horn, and that was all he did. He was killed, all right? The sheriff stated further, my opinion, the horn, whether it scares my deputy or whether my deputy reacts to the shot of the horn, ends up firing his weapon. The second deputy fired his weapon, reacting to that gunfire. Both officers fired multiple times. The 3 officers on the scene did not fire their weapon. The other 3 officers, all right? He was pronounced dead at the scene, the suspect here, okay? Who's the victim. The officers cooperated with the investigation. The body cam video shows the incident, but it's not been released. So let me remind you of this sheriff, okay? The sheriff said the shooting was the first to be recorded by police body cameras since the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office started using them last year. The office adopted the technology after video showing one of his deputies assaulting a woman attracted national news attention. Let's go to that video, Chantel Arnold. Let's go to it.
H.
Oh, he got it on.
We covered this story at Indisputable. That woman was already a victim of assault. She was running away from being jumped on by multiple individuals. That police officer then victimized her again by assaulting her, and a bystander picked it up, okay? Now, what happened to that officer? The deputy that brutalized that young lady, let's put his picture up. His name is Julio Alvarado. We had also reported how Jefferson Parish was one of the worst offenders of profiling and targeting Hispanic drivers and covering it up by classifying all Hispanic drivers as white, creating false reports. No one has been arrested. They exploited a loophole in state policy that exempted law enforcement from collecting and delivering data to the state if they have an anti-racial profiling policy in place, which essentially rendered the law worthless. The American Civil Liberties Union of Louisiana has filed several lawsuits in the past 2 years against the sheriff's office, stemming from what the ACLU says are incidents of violent beatings, racial profiling. Last week, Glenn McGovern, a civil rights lawyer hired by Mr. Bailey's family, told the New Orleans news station that Mr. Bailey's constitutional rights have been violated and questioned why the police did not use other tactics to get him out of the vehicle. I completely agree with that lawyer. What these cops did, they deserve to go to jail. They deserve to go to prison, and this family deserves justice. But we have covered multiple incidents of injustices happening to black folk in that same parish, and those cops have been let go, not punished, hidden. As a matter of fact, when we first reported on the incident of the assault of the black woman, they refused to release the information of the cop who did it. Mr. Mayor, thoughts on this?
Well, I think this twin, unequal form of justice is exactly what the word privilege means. And I know this is now becoming a triggering word for folks. They don't want to hear about the privilege, and I can certainly understand that. But the Latin root of privilege, unless I'm getting this wrong, never went to law school, so Dr. Richey, you'll have to correct me. Dr. Richey has, if you don't know, has more degrees than an oven. But the privilege means private law, right? As in there is one law for a certain set of folks, and then there's a private special law for another class of citizens. And for too long in America, really for 400 years in America, there's been one law that's applied to black Americans, no matter what side of the badge that they're on. We've seen it in our city in Ithaca, we've seen it all over the country, that black folks don't get a fair shake. When they're in the police departments, their unions don't protect them the same way they do white officers. In many cases, in largest cities, they've had to start their own black police unions for exactly this reason. And when they're on the other side of the badge, too often they're not protected, even when, and this is great that this parish now has body cameras. How many stories did we hear over the decades from people who claim to be victimized by the police, but we just believed the police narrative because we didn't have eyes on it ourselves. Now we can see it, and we've got to be honest, we have to stop putting not just people's lives at risk, black, white, people's lives at risk from these police officers. We have to stop putting these police officers in this position. Those officers never should have responded to that call in the first place. Unarmed responders can do a better job with most of these calls for service for people who are unconscious, for people who are sleeping in their car. There's no reason to send an armed police officer that is only by their presence going to escalate the situation, and then ask them to function as social workers and de-escalate a situation that their very presence ratcheted up in the first place.
And you talk from experience. I've cited your work right here on Indisputable. In Ithaca, New York, you all looked at your 911 calls. You say, wait a minute, almost half of these calls do not require a police officer. So you enacted a new policy as mayor. And I want to remind people, you were mayor as of just a few days ago. All right, so you got elected as the youngest mayor in the history of Ithaca. You brought in amazing insight, creative approaches, and common sense solutions. How did you fight the police union? How did you navigate the nuances of police unions when you said, listen, we don't need more cops, we need a better approach? How did you do that?
It was difficult. I mean, you should always try to get the police at the table and get them to buy in to these common sense reforms. But in the end, we have to remember that police are public servants, just like any other government employee. They are here to serve the public and to serve the community. So they can have a seat at the table, but the table belongs to the community.
Come on.
And these rules have to be changed. As you said, about half of what we ask police officers to do could be done by somebody who's not carrying a gun, somebody who's trained in social work, maybe former teachers, street outreach folks. Not only will they do a better job, not only will it end in violence and death less often, but this will actually free up our police officers to investigate the crimes that they can make a difference on, from sexual assault to gun possession. It is a smarter form, and we have to stop putting our officers in these hard positions. We're burning them out, we're wearing them out, and they're making lethal, deadly mistakes.
Directly from a man who actually has done it.